In this lesson, we will be examining the documentation that describes the airline operation, both in terms of operational support and maintenance support. First is the underpinning document for the operation, the operations manual. The operator has several responsibilities regarding the ops manual. He must ensure that it contains all instructions and information necessary for operations personnel to perform their duties whilst not contravening the operating licence, which we have examined earlier, that is, the Air Operator Certificate, AOC. The basic rules for the production, amendment and use of the ops manual are these. The language should be English, and all operations personnel have easy access to a copy of each part that is relevant to their duties. Additionally, the operator must supply crew members with a personal copy relevant for personal study. It must be kept up to date and all operations personnel alerted to any relevant changes. The contents must be presented in a user-friendly way that observes human factors and principles. Now, we will examine the parts and contents of the ops manual. In this section, we will examine the structure and contents of the ops manual. The operator must ensure that the main structure is as follows. Part A is entitled General Basic and comprises all non-type related operational policies, instructions and procedures needed for a safe operation. Part B deals with type-specific instructions and procedures. Part C relates to the geographic area of the operation, that is, the routes to be flown and the aerodromes used. And finally, Part D, which refers to the training of all operational personnel in their duties. Now, we will examine each part in more detail, starting with Part A, General Basic. This part contains much information about safe flight that is common to all aeroplane types. For example, ground de-icing and anti-icing, adverse and potentially hazardous atmospheric conditions, wake turbulence, incapacitation of a crew member, security, incident and accident handling procedures, altitude alerting procedures, ground proximity warning system (GPWS) procedures, traffic collision alert and avoidance system (TCAS) procedures, and finally use of the minimum equipment list (MEL) and configuration deviation list (CDL), topics to which we shall turn next. In this section, we will deal first with a number of definitions that relate to the aeroplane's minimum equipment list, its MEL, and the relevant source document, the Master MEL, MMEL. Annex 6 defines each term. First, the Master Minimum Equipment List, which is established for a particular aircraft type containing items, one or more of which is permitted to be unserviceable at the commencement of a flight. The MMEL may be associated with special operating conditions, limitations or procedures. It is produced by collaboration between the aviation authority from the state of design and the designer. And second, the Minimum Equipment List, which provides for the operation of aircraft subject to specified conditions, with particular equipment inoperative. It is prepared by an operator in conformity with, or more restrictive than, the MMEL established for that aircraft type. It is a list based on the MMEL that is the collaborative effort of the operator and its aviation authority, the state of the operator. Currently, EASA does not regulate the MEL and Master MEL. It is left to the JAA to continue the regulation of this area. The MEL is applicable up to the commencement of flight, which itself is defined as is on the screen. If, however, an Airworthiness Directive, AD, or other such mandatory requirement is issued by the state of design which contravenes the MMEL or MEL, the AD or its equivalent is supreme and must be actioned. Two more definitions must be known. First, what is meant by inoperative in terms of equipment, that is, an item, function, component or system which does not accomplish its intended purpose or is not consistently functioning within its design operating limits or tolerances. And second, rectification interval, which is the agreed time limit for operating with certain inoperative equipment. This is usually an agreement between the operator and the state of the operator. From the previous scene, we have established that the operator must produce, for each aeroplane type operated, an MEL that is acceptable to his authority. This MEL must be based upon and be no less restrictive than the master MEL produced by the manufacturer. The operator must not operate outside of the restrictions of the MEL without the permission of the authority, and then never outside the master MEL. There are limits to the applicability of the MEL. The controlling document has the MEL as applicable only up to the commencement of flight, which, as already noted, means the beginning of taxi. However, the operator must ensure that procedures are established in the MEL to cover equipment problems during that period from commencement of flight until the brakes are released to begin takeoff roll. Thereafter, the aeroplane is deemed to be in flight, and, as such, each equipment problem must be evaluated as to whether the flight may be continued, the responsibility for this decision residing ultimately with the pilot in command. Crew members are required to report malfunctions unless they are already known, and it is the commander's responsibility to ensure the flight may safely proceed in accordance with the MEL. Additionally, it is the commander's responsibility to ensure that all instruments and equipment are operable unless there is provision for inoperability in the MEL. For the moment, this concludes the investigation of the MEL. However, the subject will be revisited later, when maintenance requirements are discussed. Now, we will return to the operations manual. Earlier, it was noted that Part A was generic, that is, it dealt with the instructions, procedures and limitations applicable to the entire operation and all aeroplanes. Obviously, there will be differences that relate to specific types, variants or indeed aircraft. This material is found in Part B of the Ops Manual. Part B contains the following type, variant or aircraft specific information, which concludes this section.